When it comes to the world of rap and hip hop, there is a certain stereotype that all those who participate in this genre go to prison. Now, this is false in a wide variety of ways, and yet there are those who have gone above and beyond the call, if you will, and proven that this stereotype is something that deserves to be talked about on some level. But just because you go to jail doesn't mean you'll be there forever. But there have been some long sentences in the community, so allow us to show you 12 rappers with the longest prison sentences. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 12, Max B. Let's start off with a longer one, shall we? A hotel robbery gone bad was the start of all of this. Max B wasn't even there apparently. No one disputes that. But New Jersey courts ruled that he was part of a conspiracy that resulted in the shooting death of a man in 2006. After Bigavelli's on and off again girl and another acquaintance shot him while attempting to rob his friend. He may not have been around, but Max B wound up picking up 75 years after being pinned in the conspiracy. People forget that even being attached to a crime loosely can put you behind bars. Number 11, Shmurda. In January of 2002, a 16-year-old at a nightclub was caught up in an altercation outside the venue when he was beaten and shot to death, allegedly by Shmurda. The case has caused so much controversy, 2 convictions, the Supreme Court getting involved, the Louisiana NAACP investigating jury deliberations, that Free Shmurda became another campaign to rally around for much of the hip-hop community. And though he would get house arrest after a certain appeal, he would find himself back in prison. And when that happened, his sentence became a lot longer, and he is still in prison now. Number 10, Bump J. Bump J and another man walked into a Chicago bank and emptied it of $100,000 in 2007 before going out on the run. Bump would eventually get arrested during a traffic stop after more than a year and cop a plea deal, taking 7 years for the heist. Now, on one hand, you could argue that this almost didn't occur because of the fact he was at a traffic stop when he got tagged. But if he really felt that desperate to do things that he had to rob a place, his fate was inevitable. Number 9, Slick Rick. Just as his career was picking up, Slick Rick got busted for shooting his cousin/bodyguard who had been attempting to extort him. Unfortunately, Rick also shot an innocent person standing nearby, and a police chase resulted in Rick picking up an attempted murder charge and serving 5 years. There is so much wrong with this situation, it's honestly a bit hard to comprehend, because not only did he try and kill his family member, he failed to do it in such a way that another person, an innocent bystander, found themselves getting hurt. And people wonder why this stereotype exists. Number 8, Mystical. Once one of the biggest rappers in the game, Mystical threw it all away after an attack on a stylist turned really ugly. He and 2 of his bodyguards were convicted of forcing the stylist into sexual acts, which landed the MC very firmly behind bars for the better part of a decade. He spent nearly 2,200 days in jail for what he did, and when he came out, his name was not worth much. That's the other thing about artists like these going to prison. If you're there for a few months or a year, you're likely to be fine overall, as you can spend time working on music and such. But when you're there for years, it can slowly make you irrelevant because you're fighting other people who are out there in the world right now making music. And that's the difference right there. Number 7, Rima. You might think that because this case is simple, it's not as tragic, but rarely is that ever the case. So what happened with the rapper Rima? She shot her friend in the stomach after an argument which derailed a promising career. Rima would end up serving 6 years in prison because of her actions. And as we've talked about, and will talk about again, this is exactly the problem. Violence is rampant within these genres of music, and apparently even an argument is enough to go and pull out a weapon and cause serious harm. Number 6, My Son. The tale of My Son is honestly a bit ironic and tragic all at the same time. You see, just as he was about to drop his debut album after a string of highly successful mixtapes, My Son felt the hammer fall with 2 convictions of armed robbery stemming from 2 separate cab driver robberies in 1998, both of which he says he was innocent of. 14 years came down from the judge, and even though he only wound up serving 7, he never really recovered career-wise. And this is yet another perfect example of why rappers and hip-hop artists get this brand of criminal inevitability. Because here we have an example of someone who could have made a huge impact in the rap world, and yet because of his actions, it was over before it could take off in a major way. Number 5, Flesh and Bone. This one is really a sad story, and not one that is fun from any side. After a series of legal issues and incidents involving the brandishing of firearms, Flesh and Bone was eventually locked up after pulling a loaded AK-47 on a former friend and aimed it right at them. The judge was able to show some mercy, pointing out how his sadly extensive history of being abused as a child, but still sent him away for 12 years to straighten out. He served 8 more or less before being released. The story could have gotten a lot more intense had the judge been less lenient, especially since an AK-47 is actually illegal to own in the US, and the acts he did with the gun could have easily caused him more years. Number 4. Shine. 10 years in jail is an awful long time, but that's what Shine got for his role in a wild shooting at a Manhattan nightclub that resulted in Diddy and then girlfriend Jennifer Lopez fleeing in a car before being pulled over. 3 people were injured that night, and Shine took the rap, only to get deported upon being released in 2009. So that right there is a double slap in the face, if you will, because not only did he serve a long time in prison, but he was forced to leave the US because of his actions. Something that rap and hip-hop stars don't seem to get at times is that their actions have consequences, and they'll keep paying for them if they're not careful. Number 3. Turk. The Hot Boys didn't have the best track record when it came to staying out of prison, which sadly is a recurring theme in regards to the rap and hip-hop worlds at times. Cash Money's stable of young talent was busted up again when Turk was arrested for his involvement in the shooting of a Memphis police officer, which is a quick way to get you into some serious trouble. He was eventually arrested on weapons charges and other violations, but it was the attempted murder rap that got him his 14 years, of which he served almost 9 before finally getting out. Ironically, other members of Cash Money not only served time, but Lil Wayne, one of the stable's biggest members ever, might be going back to prison himself pretty soon. Number 2. Chi Ali. In January of 2000, the Native Tongues rhymer Chi Ali was involved in the death of his brother-in-law and went out on the run, leading authorities on a year-plus-long chase that ended in March of the following year, when he was finally apprehended and charged with the killing. He wound up on America's Most Wanted in the meantime and was hit with 14 years for the crime. He got out a little early as he was released in 2012, but it does go to show just how much you can pay the price when you do a major crime like this. Number 1. Big Lurch. This one is honestly kinda scary. You've been warned. The Bay Area rapper known as Big Lurch was doing perfectly fine for himself until he got a little too high up on dust. PCP if you don't get the lingo. He literally cooked up his girlfriend and ate her. The cops allegedly found him screaming in the middle of the street with no memory of anything that had happened, just bits of her flesh in his stomach. He won't be getting out of prison because of his sentence, and he's served almost 19 years in prison so far. This is why you don't do drugs, kids, because if you do them wrong, you may not remember what you did, but you will be held responsible for it. So what do you think? What do you think of this look at rappers and hip-hop stars who went way too far and got themselves in such trouble that they got some very long prison sentences? Do you know the stories of these artists before you came and watched the video? Do you know of any other rappers that have very long prison sentences? Do you think the rap and hip-hop culture will ever change? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.